Hi. We began organizing this roundtable late last year. And at that time, the latest episode of civic unrest in Iran, that's really not easy to do, is that talk, trip over a chair, appeared to have ended actually in November. Protests against the end of subsidies for gasoline, which had resulted in a drastic increase in gas prices. These protests escalated in scale, in scope, and in violence. And the success of the government in cracking down on these protests led me to think about previous incidents of unrest in Iranian history, and in modern Iranian history. And as a historian, when I say modern, of course I mean now, but I also mean everything in the last 200 years. I'm sorry about that. It's all one big. This table, from a report by the Center for Strategic and International Studies, issued right before the November protests of last year, illustrates I'm not the only one inclined to think about this in historical terms or with historical precedents in mind. Some of the most significant political changes in Iranian history began as local or single-issue protests, aggravated by economic distress, that became nationalized through modern communication. First telegraph and press, then telephone, and now, of course, the internet. A few of these protests did force change, either in government policy or in the very nature of Iranian government, notably in 1906 and, as you may know or have heard, in 1979. But as you can see from this table, if you're squinting, you can get a copy of this later if you want. Most of these protests, in fact, fail under the weight of state oppression. They're snuffed out. Now, I might add a success or two to this table. For example, in 1919, during the last years of the Qajar dynasty, popular protests successfully pressured members of Iran's young parliament to reject a treaty that would have reduced Iran to becoming a virtual protectorate of Great Britain, kind of avoiding the Sykes-Picot fate that my colleagues have talked about. But there were some failures to add to the list. For example, in the summer of 1935, the second decade of the Pahlavi dynasty, protests in the city of Mashhad against a new hat law, which people were correctly worrying might lead to a forced unveiling law, were met with military action. The army was rolled out. The success or failure of these protests, however big they became, depended very much on how unified the political elites were and how much control they could retain over the coercive power of the state. And it was only 10 years ago that a fracturing of the Islamic Republican political elite after a contested presidential election in 2009 fueled speculation that the Islamic Republic might not be able to withstand a nationalized level of protest facilitated by social media. But the Islamic Republic has simply increased the coercive power of the state to match the determination and desperation of the protesters. Would-be defectors from the political elite were quickly neutralized. And even loyalist attempts to reform the system from within have been checked over and over again through repressive, but fully legal through Iran's constitution, institutional responses. What I thought in November of last year was that the crucial difference between the protests in November and the domestic unrest in the past is that the protests now are coupled with economic pressures that are very closely tied to Iran's unprecedented level of regional assertiveness. Not since the height of the Iran-Iraq War have more Iranian forces and resources been directed outside of its borders. Protesters have often included chants protesting against Iran's policies in Syria or in Yemen or in Iraq, including during the ones in November of 2019. This is because everyone in Iran understands that Iran's regional adventurism has served as the principal rationale behind the economic sanctions imposed on it by the rest of the world, especially the US. Recall that the main case against Iran's legal, civilian, and treaty-based nuclear energy program is its potential to be converted into an illegal, treaty-violating nuclear weapons program, and that would threaten regional adversaries like Saudi Arabia and Israel. Iran's economic miseries due to these sanctions are quite acute, and in the wake of especially in the wake of the current administration's maximum pressure campaign. And these two maps illustrate the widespread nature of economic stress, called the misery, Mapper Misery Index. The nice provinces have unemployment rates of 42%. That's a good province. And this other slide looks at the number of distribution of dead in the most recent protests. So you can see that the pain is distributed, the protests are distributed, and there's obviously a connection. Nothing illustrated the connection between foreign policy and domestic unrest in Iran more clearly than the US assassination of Quds Force Commander Qasem Soleimani in Baghdad on January 3rd. The Islamic Republic was able to mobilize, actually, crowds around nationalist outrage over his death. But as soon as the truth came out about its own downing of a Ukrainian airliner on January 8th, with dozens of Iranians and Canadian Iranians on board, the frustrations of November returned. This is a sort of telegram posting by students at Amir Kabir University on January 12th. And amidst a new crackdown as the protests resurged, they issued this on Telegram asking to separate their democratic demands from international and regional politics. And this got attention of local observers in the region and of course around the world. And I'm going to close with the translation of part of that excerpt so you can reflect on it and just give you a sense of how these things are connected, both protesting the government, the pressures that lead to protests of the government, and how people in the country, or at least the students in the country, see their plight. And I will stop there and yield to our excellent colleagues from Queensland. Thank you.